Years ago, there was a little kid who used to cut out paper and staple them together like a little book. And he used to draw caricatures on there and flip them. And he's the first one that started the cartoon type stuff. And for years, he drew all these cartoons, and he tried to market them. And he tried to sell them. And he went all the way out to Los Angeles to try to market. He moved to Los Angeles. He couldn't find a publishing company to publish his stuff. He finally found a company in New York that was willing to publish his material. He got on a train and went from L.A. to New York City. How'd you like to make that trip? Got to New York City, found a publishing company willing to publish his stuff, and he signed a contract that was so one-sided, it was pathetic, but he was naive. What he didn't know is the contract stated that anything he produced became sole property of the publishing company. And he started producing all these cartoons. The man's name was Walt Disney. Ever heard of him? What was the character? No, it wasn't. It was Oswald the Rabbit. He had a character that he'd fallen in love with, Oswald the Rabbit. And he produced it, and they published it, and it was the first hit of its kind. No one had ever done anything like it. A year later, his company was not doing so well. He lost a lot of his good graphic artists who drew the characters. He got back on the train and went all the way back to New York to renegotiate his contract. And when he got there, 70% of his workforce that had worked in his company in L.A. and quit were all working for his publisher. And they were producing Oswald the Rabbit cartoons and not paying Walt Disney any money for it. He was devastated. He was heartbroken. He completely lost Oswald the Rabbit, the concept of cartoons. He'd invented every one of them. Every aspect of this entire creation was Walt Disney. And if you don't know it, Walt Disney was a very abused child. He was sexually molested by his father. He had 3 older brothers. Every one of them had been sexually abused by his father. The problem is all 3 older brothers had moved out and left him home with his dad. Would you consider that a problem? Yeah, that's a serious problem. Walt Disney is one of the most class characters because he took pain that most of us will never know. He took agony most of us will never know. He took loneliness and heartbreak most of us will never know. And he created happiness for millions and millions and millions of children. He took adversity and he created a safe, fun place for children to live out their positive fantasies. Now, compared to his problems, most of us don't have problems, do we? He turned it into a positive. After losing everything on that train, on the way back to L.A., or in that business, on the way back on the train back to L.A., he came up with a new character. Mickey Mouse. How many of you have ever seen an amusement park, a magazine article, a movie, a cartoon, or even a comic book about Oswald the Rabbit? How many of us, all too often, have seen and heard Mickey Mouse? Now, did his publisher steal everything Disney had? He stole his dream. He stole his product. There's one thing he couldn't get his hands on. And that was the magic that Walt Disney had. Walt Disney had a magic that was forged over years of his childhood, the pain and the relationships. And all that pain was put into a creativity that could not be stolen. And so what happens when he lost his whole dream? He was very depressed. But he came back out of it with a new determination. And you know what? If he hadn't have gotten screwed out of Oswald the Rabbit, Mickey Mouse never would have reached the level of success it has. Because that loss and that theft of his dream gave him a burning desire and a determination he never would have had in the first place. And Mickey Mouse has gone to heights far and above any of our imaginations. You can steal the products. You can steal the marketing plan. You can steal the tricks. But you can't steal the magic. And you know what? I always said this. The reason I work so hard is because deep down in the core, I am very lazy. I'm very lazy. I easily could weigh 400 pounds, sit in front of TV all day long, and eat jelly donuts. That would be so easy for me to do. I had to discipline myself not to. I had to teach myself not to be lazy. I had to learn. And I learned because I used to go out, my mentor, we were working and we got home, we worked all day, up at 7 o'clock every morning. He said, when that sun is up, so are you. And I'll never forget, we went out, we recruited all day long, we did meetings. I got back there around 11 o'clock at night. I was so exhausted, I believe I probably passed out with my clothes on. 7:30 the next day, I jumped up and I thought I was going to be cool and go over and knock on his door. Wake him up. We had connecting hotel rooms with a suite in the middle. He opens the door. He was already dressed, already showered, and he'd been out all night. He came home at 11 o'clock and dropped me off. He went out and met another group of his friends till 4 o'clock in the morning. Came home, got 2.5 hours sleep, got up, showered, and got dressed before me. And I'm going, how can you do that? How can you do that? It's a habit. Sleeping for 9 hours a day is a habit. Sleeping for 7 hours a day is a habit. Sleeping for 5 hours a day is a habit. It's a habit. I was watching that thing on TV. They called it Scared Straight, 20 years later. Oh, my God. They talked about it. They took all these kids and had these criminals talk to them. And one guy, out of that whole show, one guy said something that was so incredibly powerful. He said, you know, the one thing about jail, the one thing about prison, it's real easy to get into. And it's real hard to get out of. When I think about where I was going in my life, God must have had somebody watching over me, or I would have gone the way that they went. And I got yanked out of that and changed my environment. And most of you have better environments than that. But I look at where I am now, I'm so far away from those people. You know what I couldn't do today? If I met them in a mall and we went for coffee, I'd have a hard time having a conversation with them because I would have nothing in common with them. I wouldn't know. And so one of the things we got to look at is we got to be responsible for our influences. It's a habit we have. It's hard to change your friend. It breaks your heart sometimes to change your friends. But if you want to change your life, you got to change your influences, because right now where your life is, it's a result of the influences you've been hanging around. And I always said this, who you are is a result of who you hang around. You hang around me and some of these folks, you're going to have a hell of a time not being motivated, not being excited, not being focused. And that's what we create. We create powerful people. And if you hang around people that watch the news and bitch and moan about everything that's wrong in the world, you're going to be focused on bitching. Next thing you know, you're going to be hanging a TV over your dinner table. But if you band together, think of the energy in this room. Think of the power we have in this room. Just if we all have our mind, singleness of purpose, and we go out like an army. And I think if we all go out and we do our job right, and we all stay focused and stop whining about the petty little problems, and we start looking at real problems, and we start realizing God gave us a backbone, and God tests us every day. And that's why God gives you problems, to see if you got the guts to get past them. In the beginning, I was scared of problems. Now I realize God's setting them up. It's like little things. He sets up this little obstacle course. Go ahead, Bill Gouldd. See if you can get past that. All right, but there you go. Good. Hey, here's another one. Yeah, all right. For years I was going, oh, no. Now I got it. He sets them up to see if we got the guts to go past it. And I'm telling you what, ladies and gentlemen, 98% of our society is paranoid and paralyzed. They're not even going to try. Now, if 90%, 95%, 98% are never going to try, how much easier does it make it for us? And that's what I didn't understand. I didn't understand that if most people we know are never going to try, that's all the more reason why we should, because it's easier. What would the world be like if everybody wanted wealth and success? Be more competition. A wealthy man once told me it's easier to get wealthy in America today than it is to work for a living. I didn't believe a word. I thought that was the biggest concocted sales pitch anyone ever put together. And I stand before you today and I'll tell you it's easier to get wealthy in America today than it is to work for a living. And while you may not believe that, I look forward to seeing you stand up here one day and repeat those very same words. And that's not going to happen until you achieve wealth, because once you achieve wealth, you're going to look back and realize how complicated you made it. And you're going to realize that if you had to do it all over again, you could do it with 10% of the time and 10% of the energy. You know, it's pretty amazing. They did research, and they said 97% of the things we worry about, we have no control over. 97%. 97% of the things we worry about already happened, are going to happen anyway, or will never happen. Is that not amazing? 97% are going to happen anyway, already happened, or are never going to happen anyway. Think about it. How many times has something happened you sat around worrying about it after the fact? It's gone. It's like the toilet. It got flushed. The crap is gone. Stop worrying about it. 3% of our worries we have control over. Bottom line is, by the time you figure out which part's the 3% and 97%, they're already over too. And I'll tell you what, you'd be hard-pressed to come up with a problem that health and wealth couldn't solve. You'd be hard-pressed to find a problem that good health and wealth couldn't solve. You've got to stop worrying, folks. Worrying is a what? It's a habit. It's a bad habit. It's a losing habit. Most people spend their lives worrying. Few people spend their lives doing. Stop worrying and start doing, and you'll find the more you do, the less worries you have. You'll still have problems, but you're not going to worry about them as much. What happens when you start worrying, you start working, and you start producing good health and good wealth and good habits? See, people came to me a long time ago or several years ago and said, hey, what would you do right now if someone came and took all your money? And I thought, I'd be really mad. But see, they can take my money. But just like Walt Disney, he had a magic that he developed. And they stole his cartoon characters, and they stole his idea for cartoons. But he still had developed a talent within himself that they couldn't take. Oh, they took his money. He lost everything. But they couldn't take what he'd become. And he made back what they stole from him millions of times over. And see, what I've learned doing what I'm doing, if they took all my money away today, I could get it back in 1/10 the time. Because, see, I know how I made it. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to become so successful that no one can shake your confidence anymore. That even if you look at some catastrophic event in your life, you'll look at it and go, I could deal. I could deal. They can take your house, they can take your car, they can take your pets. But they'll never be able to take what you become.